Okay. Okay. Right, I'm just gonna record this bit only, not the beginning and the end. So, okay, so this is basically my setup here. So how do we start? How do I do? Okay, I have a pan. Now what do I do with this, Susan? Do I just put water in there and then go in here? Or I put water and go in here? Yeah. So if you have a pan like this, I would wet all the pans individually like this first. So when you wet the thing, it starts, the paint's activating. And then after this, we are going to feel things. So the whole thing with feeling your body and things, what I want you to do is not just look at things, because we're very heavily visual, right? We like to see things. We eat with our eyes. We decide and make decisions with our eyes. So what I want you to try today is to use your other senses as well, besides just your eyes. Because so my eyes is seeing, okay, yep, they're all nice and moist on the top. Now what? So this is my water, right? Now, what I want you to do, if you have a piece of paper like this, okay, or just hold it like this and just clean and take all the water off. And then feel your brush. Okay, that's the feeling of a brush when it's dry. You turn it and hold it with the other hand. Okay, so this is dry, right? And you put that back in the water. Do you feel that it's a bit heavier? You feel that the feeling is different when there's water on this versus when there's no water on it? Yes, maybe no. So if you can't tell the difference, you either have a brush that is too thin, that it doesn't make a difference, but you should, a good watercolor brush, you should be able to feel that there is water in my brush. So it's a little bit, it just feels different. And it's not necessarily heavier, but more just like, oh yeah, it's a bit, yeah, it's like it wants to tip to the front. You know, so do this a few times, take the water off, feel it, go the other way. So the reason why I switch hands is because sometimes this one knows everything and wants to do everything because it knows everything. But if you turn it to the other hand, this is more sensitive because it's kind of hardly used, right? In this way. So it tends to feel more. So this is my dry brush feeling, right? You can feel it that this feels it more than the right one. So if you're right-handed, obviously. If you're the opposite hand, then you can use the non-dominant hand. So if I just now go back in here, that's a full load of water. So what does a full load of water feel like? So I can't see the water. So let's put some color in it just so that it helps. I'll put some blue. So we're going to use just one color first. So I'm going to go to this ultramarine color. So this is a full load of brush. Full load. Feels like this. Just play around like this. So that's after I put it in the water. This, I put it in the water and then I put it in the pan. And then I go like this. Okay. So what I want you to do is you go in the water, you go in the pan, and then feel that. That actually feels heavier. And then once you put it down, and then you lift this, it feels lighter. Try it again. So if I just go in the pan like this, it feels heavier. And then I'm going to bring it down. So if I take all of the paint off, yep, that feels dry to me. Pretty dry. So this is called dry brushing on the left side here. So this is what is often called juicy. It's like a juicy mix. And you can see it because you can see that it's glistening. So that's a nice juicy wash. And then within here, you can actually see already there's different kinds of thickness and consistency. So there are 4 or 5 different consistency in watercolor that you can control and make happen. They are called, back out, T. So on the paper, T, basically you could still see the paper. And then coffee is darker. There are 2 or more kinds of coffees. So weak coffee, strong tea, coffee, and then you've got milk, which is the darkest. So depending on whether your watercolor is transparent or a bit opaque, sometimes semi-opaque, sometimes opaque, you might get this dark. And then this one is, I'm just doing gradation. So this is what you can say, if you look at the surface of the paper here, it looks like there's a lot of grains, right, on the surface. It's not clean or even like this. So that's called granulation. Granulation is basically when the paint and the agent that binds it doesn't want to be fully mixed. So when you put it down, it starts to separate on the paper. It's basically what it is. I really love this. It's my favorite kind of paint, but not every paint is like that. So this is the flat one. You can see up here that is very clean. So that's the different kinds of paint. Okay, so going back to tea, you have tea. How do we know what tea feels like? Here, so if you put, again, a little bit of paint, water on the paint like that, and then put it on the pan, right? This is why a lot of watercolor pans are white, because it helps you see how much color or mix you need to create what you want. So what is this? Let me add more water to this. So if it can go around and kind of be like, if it's diluted enough that it moves around on the palette like this, this is tea. And then if I add a bit more paint, that's strong tea, or beginning to be like a weak coffee, right? And then if I add more, you see how the pan, you start seeing less and less of the pan because the color is intensifying, right? So this is nice. I really like this. Usually I start at around this consistency. So what does this look like on the paper? So let's try it, right? So this is kind of juicy and mid-tone. So this is kind of a medium tone, you can say. And then if I add even more paint to that, and I'll put it here, you can see that's beginning to look like thick coffee, but it's still coffee because I have a lot of water in here. So how do I get milk, right? Sometimes when your brush has too much water, it will take a while before you end up at milk. So the way to speed you up to get milk is you need to take some of the water out. Right, so let's just do this. Take this water out. And then just go back into directly to the pan that's already wet. So that feels sticky. So when you touch it, it's like a bit sticky. So now this is, there's barely much water in here. This is probably more like a cream rather than milk, because you can actually see my brush strokes on it. So if you can see brush strokes, it's not milk. It's thicker than milk. So if I put a bit of water that came from here into this, into this mix right on the paper here, then what you have is some semblance of milk. Meaning it's dark, but it's also still smooth, right? So this is still bordering cream because you could still see my brush strokes. So depending on what kind of paint you have, what kind of paper you're putting it on, this may change a little bit, right? Everybody's paint and brush and paper is a bit different, but that's ultimately the key here. So once I do this, we can look at how do we do the gradation. So let me show you quickly all the possibilities. All possibilities I wrote here. So you can use, for example, like a thin brush like this. Tiny, tiny brush like this. And draw with your brush with watercolor. And you'll get pretty accurate and pretty detailed work. You can do that with the small brush. You can't really do that with the other brush, but you know, so that's watercolor. You know, it's not, it's sort of illustrative style, but the method is still watercolor. Then of course you always see this stuff, right? Beautiful landscape. So this is using different kinds of techniques, but generally speaking, there is going to be a tea here. There's going to be a coffee. There's going to be some kind of maybe a bit of milk here in the dark area here. So in general, you'll start at the lightest in general. Not always the case, but in general, and then you go darker. Right, and then yeah, there's a bunch of different edges. So in one of my classes, I'll talk about edge. What does that mean? Edge means things that you can see here. This is an edge between the top and the bottom. There's a very perfectly clean edge, and then this edge here, maybe you can't see it properly. Or maybe here you can see that it's beginning to kind of, you can't see there's a perfect line. It's a bit lost. So you have lost edges. Then you have a firm edge, which is here. Then you've got things like this that are sharp edges. So that's kind of in one of the classes, you will kind of see that, right? Here's another one. So this area on the top here, we're calling it the sky method, where you put, it's called wet on wet technique. So I'll show you that. And then you lift some of these clouds up. So you take all the paint out with your brush. It's a beautiful, beautiful technique. I love taking those out. So same thing, there's going to be some sort of tea somewhere, especially back here. And then it'll become darker to coffee and then darker to milk up to here. So this one, I took a class, online class with this guy, Michael Soloviev. I don't know if you guys know him. He's teaching a lot. He's on YouTube a lot, so you can have a look at his style. So this is more his style. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And then this one is another one where I use all kinds of methods. So I have shrink wrap. You can sort of see, I use shrink wrap here. I use plastic. And I use what's called a liquid gum or a drawing gum like this to keep some areas white. So there's a billion and million different possibilities you can use watercolor with. Yeah, perfect. I'm quite happy with this one. And then you've got the urban sketching watercolor style, which is this one. So it tends to be more heavy on the line, heavy outlining before you start doing the wash. So this is normally called ink and wash. I don't like that. So this is all, it's called blooms or cauliflower, or what else is it called? It's like a bleed. where it actually looks pretty good. So it's something like a happy accident that you like to have. So this sort of thing, you really can't control it. So if you're lucky, you get something nice. So this was pretty good. And sometimes you get it even better than this. So down here is also an example of dry brushing. So a lot of painting with watercolor also requires you to think about time, to give things time to dry. And sometimes it's the opposite. You don't have time. You have to put it in or you will lose that moment and then you can't have it again. So that's kind of different to oil painting or acrylic, right? Because you can always cover it up later if you don't like something. Kind of can't do that with watercolor. So the Michael Soloviev said, even if it's wrong, watercolor requires you to be confident. Confidence first, skills comes after, which I kind of like. So that's the possibilities. Are you guys okay? Is this clear? So,
Susan, could I ask a question, please?
yes.
And I wanted to know that when you say you are using shrink wrap, how exactly are you using it? Like, are you painting the surface brown first and then you're,
Yeah, this one is multi-medium and it's different things. So the shrink wrap basically it's a cling film, right?
I see.
The cling film is basically put on top of a wet paint.
Okay, got it.
Then you just leave it till tomorrow. When it dries, you peel it off and you get this. It's almost like, you see there's like a bit shiny thing happening there.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, very
And
interesting.
the other thing that's great about this is if you have paint that's granulated, so it will look like rocks. So who's doing the painting? Not me. I just put things down and I walk away and then look. It's
That's very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Right. Anyone else? So you can just ask me anything anytime. So this is what we're gonna do in the first class is we're gonna learn how to work out. Actually, no, this is more layering. So we will do this in class 2 or 3, I can't remember, but we do need to learn how to do layering and then also wet on wet, which is there. So this is what I want to talk about is the paper. So you have 2 different kinds of paper. I'm not sure you can see, right? One has more texture than the other one. So sometimes that makes a difference when you're actually painting. So depending on your material, what I want you to think about when learning watercolor is that you are kind of your own teacher in a way. That's probably not the best way to say it, but it's almost like because you have different paint, different paper, different material, and you are a different person than I am. When I'm doing this and it looks like it looks like something, and then you want to create exactly like that, you're gonna be disappointed all the time because we're all gonna just be doing it all slightly different, and the outcome is going to be slightly different. So what I want you to think about is that while yes, you're looking at my work, your nature, the way you do things, your paper and all the stuff that's there will be slightly different than me, right? So that's a bit of letting go there already. So if you're a perfectionist and you're the kind of person who I want to have exact, you might want to leave that outside the class and bring your curiosity and more like, oh, why is mine like this and yours like that? So interesting. It's probably a better attitude. So this is another example of it. It's kind of more illustration kind of style, right? So you can use watercolor for that as well. But this is just using it quite lightly. This was ages ago now when I taught this class. So this here is an example of beautiful, mind-blowing granulation. So we technos, I love this. This is like, if I can paint with this only, that'd be great. But unfortunately,
with texture, yeah.
All texture, all this kind of granulation doesn't work for every kind of thing that I want to paint. So, right, but that's great. Okay, so these are all going to be in the class. So we're going to talk about color and edges. So what you want to do if you're, even if you've used your palette a few times and you think you know your palette, it's always good to swatch your palette and get to understand it. Why is it doing this? Why is my palette like this? So this is what I recommend you doing. So in, I think, week 4 or 5, towards the end of it, we are going to talk about color. This is the color wheel. Get it? So if you'd like to, you can also do your color chart consistency like this. Instead of, straight lines, you can do it in circles like this too. So the reason why is that because if you have straight lines versus circle, you will fill it in a different way, right? And it's worth also noting that when you're using watercolor, do you go from the top to the bottom? Or do you go from the bottom to the top? There are things like this, and you kind of, it's interesting to see what you do. If you're right-handed like me, you tend to want to paint like you're writing a book. So you go from the left to the right of the page. There is no rule around that though. You can go from anywhere from this side to that side too. There's no rule, right? So just making your shape different shape to fill in, make you do things differently. So think about that. So I did top to bottom. That's generally what I do. I'd go top to bottom. And with watercolor, what you don't want to do is paint like you're painting a wall. Basically, you don't want to go back and forth too much, because either you're going to make the paper or you're going to ruin something else. You're going to kind of do some imbalance, and it also makes the paint dry in a very hard, not very clean, not very fresh sort of way. So what I recommend, even if you're doing a circle, right, is to try and just go one in one go and be done. So I have little beads there. Don't worry about it, leave it. So once again, the method or the attitude around watercolor is not fuss. I think the biggest problem I always find students have is they fuss with it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just in the interest of time, just going to trying to do a quick consistency here. Well, I do it 2 times. So you can follow me if you like. I'll use ultramarine, still ultramarine. So ultramarine was mined in Afghanistan. Apparently the Wikipedia says it was mined in Afghanistan by French people and brought to Europe from Afghanistan. So it's basically lapis lazuli, and then they grind it down into this color. So what am I doing? This is coffee. So I'll just put the coffee in the middle of the 3. So I'll start from the top. And why am I doing it like this? So I lift my paper up a little bit and I bring it like this. Wow, this paper is so nice. So this is the Bao Hong paper. So I go down, I kind of bring all the paint down.
Susan, is it 300 GSM paper?
Yeah.
Yeah, no wonder it's looking so good.
And it's 100% cotton. Oh my God.
Yay, nice.
Yep, very nice. So if you do a tip like this, even if your paint is not super juicy, what you get is kind of a nice kind of even colored coffee. And then all you do is add a bit or a lot. You can add a lot of water to that to make it into tea. And then we can try and do the tea on the right here. Woo, I love this paper. So the thing with Bao Hong paper though, if you go to Lazada, it's the information is just so opaque. I have no idea what I'm buying sometimes. Bao Hong. And then there's the 8K, 14K, 32K. I don't understand those. Does anybody know what that means? I don't.
Size, Susan, size.
Is it size?
Yeah. They are standard size of China and Taiwan. So 4K, 8K are sizes.
So, okay. Right. That's good to know. It doesn't say it on this thing at all, though. That's a different problem. So tea, coffee, and now we're going to try and get a milk. So how do I do that? Okay, let's take away some of the paint, some of the water first, and then get into this pan until it's a bit sticky. Right, but not so sticky, not too sticky, and then let's go. Ooh, beautiful. So we'll also look at how you use your brush. That's another thing, right? I'm sometimes so used to using my brush in a way that I don't notice, but so here you can almost I don't know if you can see. The tip of my brush has more paint on it and the back of my brush doesn't. So when I do it like this, it looks like it's a streak there. So what happens? Now what? If I've got a streak, I don't want a streak. So I just turn it around like this because the tip of my brush is the one that's making this side dark. So I'm going to turn it around and go back the other way and even it out. Well, I can't. It's drying out. So that's tea, coffee, milk. So notice I'm using this to clean my brush also. Never mind. Right, so back to tea. So that's the tea one here is like this. And then I will go in here and go in a bit, get more paint a bit more. So this is using the palette to mix all your colors first. There are other ways you can do this, but I want to have coffee here. But I don't have time to go to here to there. So if this is too thin, okay, that's not thick enough. I want this thickness, but I've already put this down. While it's still wet, you can go back into here and directly come from there to here. So that is also called wet on wet when you put paint on wet surface. So that's kind of now becoming more like that, right? So shall we try it again? What if I want really, really thick milk, but I want to wet my paper first? Yeah, I don't know, let's try. So I'll wet my paper first. Right, so you want to make sure that your wet space is actually even, as in you don't have, dry patches anywhere. So you want it to be covered properly. And then go directly in here. So all my water from my brush has gone here. Now my brush is sort of dry-ish. So I don't actually need any more water. And I'm just gonna go sticky, pick up a lot, and then I'm just gonna put it on. See what happens. This is what I love about watercolor. Look at this, it's painting itself. So if you leave this within about 15 minutes, this is the whole outside is going to cover the edges. But if you want to help it, you can go in the middle here and help it move. So this is why having a really good pointed brush is helpful, because if you want the edge to be really clean, you can do it round and round like this. And then I'll just turn it around like this. Okay, So wet on wet, wet on wet, wet on dry, just now. Tea, coffee, milk. So I'm going to use a different paper now. This is Overjoy cheap paper. So here's an example of consistency again. But this one is more dealing with how much water is in your brush without going back into your pan over and over. So just one time only in the pan. So what does that mean? How do you mean? What do you mean? I'll show you. So I'll do another brush here. So I'll go in the pan with a juicy brush. Right, so my brush is basically quite heavy with paint and water, so it's kind of juicy. So we'll go from, I don't know, the left side and go like this. And just keep going until the bottom. So you've got this beautiful color. I have not done any more. I didn't load any more. I didn't put any more water there. Let's just keep going with that brush. So this is dry brush. So what a dry brush for? It's great for surfaces of water and things. So things like this. Normally this kind of brush strokes is really good. All right, so in order to get this, you must get rid of 90% of your paint, and then you'll get this dry brush effect. So the way you want to clean your brush is to imagine that the water is here, right? And this is the top of my hand is the bottom of this water. You want to push it down. Just move it sideways. So in the water, and then you want to do this. You see how there's still a lot coming out? So if you're only doing it in midair, it doesn't take all of the color out. So if you want to really clean your brush, you need to push it down into the bottom a bit more. Not too hard, but hard enough for all the stuff to come out. You see how it's still wet. It's still a lot of paint there. So you want to do that, and then you can check how much paint is left by just putting it on the paper. Okay, that's clean. Clean. Let's go. So I have a nice puddle here. So let's talk about. So that's from a milk to a tea, and then a very weak tea, and then dry. So if I go from already a tea kind of consistency all the way down. So what this is you test how much water can my brush hold? How long does this go on and on forever? It doesn't go on and on forever. So if you have a brush that doesn't hold that much water, this might end like in the middle here. So this is great, this brush, because it has a long, it endures a lot of the water. It keeps the water in there. Okay. And then you can also do another one where you clean your brush. So so you have juicy, which is very wet, and then you have thirsty. So thirsty brush is like this, where I've taken pretty much most of the water out. And then I go into paint. So this is the sticky point. And then you can do the sticky test. So if my paint is quite sticky, this is what happens. Doesn't last as long. And it goes into dry brush quite fast. Right, so if it helps, it's great to make notes. So I don't know, sticky and thirsty. So these are terms that I will use over and over again. I think not everybody will use the same method, but I think thirsty and juicy is pretty much used quite often, right? And then this is tea, milk, tea. This is dry brush, you know, just make some notes. Okay. Right, so in the interest of time, we're going to do a quick painting. Okay, so you can join us, join me. Is there any questions before we go? Before we move on?
Hi, Susan.
Yes.
Hi, can I check what is the effect of cold press paper?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a whole other thing. So cold press and paper is what I use all the time. WeTech likes hot press. So the hot press is basically very smooth, super smooth, baby's bottom smooth. I guess it's a matter of taste. So what's the question about?
Cold press paper. What kind of
is-
effect is cold press paper give?
What kind of effect? So what you've seen
effect.
me do just now, all this stuff just now, this is cold.
Yeah.
This is all cold press. So you can sort of see, right? Look, the surface, it's got bumps in it.
Right, yes.
So there's even another one that's called rough. So there's even more rough than this, but this is generally what cold press looks like. It has what they call a lot of teeth.
Right, okay.
And then a cold press is basically like, yeah, baby's bottom kind of. So I don't know if I even have cold press because I don't like cold press. Wait, maybe I do have. One sec. Yeah, cold press. So this is hot press.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you can see, but this has there's no teeth whatsoever. It's just super smooth.
Okay, the hot press ones, right? Okay.
Yeah, so it's a matter of taste. If you like to do lots of detail, if you're painting small, if you use pen a lot, or you want to do a lot of detail, the hot press is usually what's good for that.
Okay.
Cold press is when you're like, you want to do very big swath and big kind of blooms and different kind of colors. To me, the cold press is better for that.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so kind of
Thank you.
granulation. Also, I don't know if granulation looks better on cold press or hot press. Don't know. Beck, do you have a opinion?
They do look very different. Hot press generally for very detailed work like flowers and all the, very, very fine edges where you want sharp edges. Granulation doesn't work as well on hot press. It does granulate, but it doesn't look the same. Also, the other point is that brands are very different. So every brand has different teeth. Some brands hot press could be some other brands cold press, right? So you got to watch out for brands.
Yep. It's a big hole of consistently buying things you don't like, and then you have to find the one you like, and then that's it. Stop there, and then just buy that. So the other option is
Susan, I do have a suggestion for beginners.
Yes.
If you find like a reasonable, good brand that you want to use, stick to it for a while, at least for 3 to 6 months, because changing paper really mess up your learning if you're not.
It confuses you. That's a good point.
Okay, so for beginner, we should use the hot press paper, right? Like you suggested, the 100% cotton 300 GSM. Is that the recommended one?
I don't know about Susan. I recommend cold press for beginners. Switch to hot press later on, but start with cold press.
Okay.
Yeah, cold press is generally where everybody starts at. Watercolor paper, but I also, if you're a beginner, it really, as long as your paper is 300 GSM, you're good to go. It's the surfaces that you're going to get picky later, but the moment when if you're still trying to work out how to control water, how to mix this, how to mix that, how to create kind of effects that you want, the paper may help you more later, but in the beginning it does confuse you even more. So I made notes here about all the paper that I use. So I've got the mixed media paper. I use it a lot for teaching. The Canson extra large is like the blue one, right? So, and then you've got the Bao Hong just now that I got. That's pretty good. And then the Canson Aquarelle, which is also nice. So it's all cold press. And then the cheap but cheerful one is the Overjoy 100% cellulose. Basically, it's wood pulp, 100% wood pulp paper from Overjoy. I really like it. It's really, really good. And I think it's 300 GSM as well. So this is pretty good. And you kind of, as beginners, you want paper that you don't care about too much, you know? You don't want to kind of be precious with it. So I recommend that. So, yeah. So here are some of the fronts if you like. So this is called Cold Press, Fabriano Cold Press. Not too expensive. This is the two that I used to teach all the time. So they're not watercolor paper, they're mixed media. Oh, so sorry, this is mixed media paper. This is the aquarelle, so that's watercolor paper. So they're both 300 GSM. And you know, one is just has this, what do you call it? It has this sort of texture that goes up and down, you know, so it has extra texture on it that some of you might like or might not like, depending on your taste. I don't know. Sorry, I think something is happening here where my light is too overblown. Okay, that's better.
That's
Okay.
a really lovely painting.
Thank you. Yeah, I just continuously paint, man. I don't even know what's in what. This is just random things. So I think I'm gonna stop there. If you have any questions beyond that, I was gonna do a quick painting, but I think we're running out of time. So what I'm gonna do is just show you. So where is it? Oh yeah. So I've started doing this. I don't know if anybody wants to, you know, if you kind of have your own palette, but you want to try artist grade quality. I've made little mini palette. I call it basic watercolor sampler. So I put this on in my shop. If you want to test high quality watercolor, this is all Daniel Smith paint that I have, that I just squeeze into it myself. So if you want to try some, you can buy that. And the information for my, I don't know how to do this. Let me just see. Do I need to do anything else besides give you the links?
I think Belle has done that.
Oh,
Susan.
she's done that? Okay, great.
Yeah, if you check the chat,
Yeah,
Belle has
okay,
put
great.
a
I
link
just
there.
see it. So that's kind of it, guys. You can go to this and everything is in the information is all there. The Pinterest is basically SOOJNOLIJ. And I'm just gonna leave it there. And then, yeah, and there's other articles here if you want to read it about different things. So the one about watercolor brush and paper. So this one is good because it basically talks about qualities of everything from paint, brush, paper that I use, that I talk about. So you can go there too. So I wanted the blog basically to be to support the classes and to help you learn as well. So I'm learning all the time. So this is what I'm learning and I put it there and then you can learn from that as well. So the shop is here. If you want to buy that set there, it's basically here. Basic watercolor sampler. So I'm learning to do this, all these dots, you know. So interesting. So it's there. That's kind of where I'm going to leave it. So let me just see. Yeah, thank you all for coming. Do you have last comments or questions or anything before we leave? Oh, my class is basically only 15 students, so you want to stick with that. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. KP says she didn't see anything in the chat.
Maybe because he joined later. You need
Right, so let me just cut and
paste it
paste
again.
it, and I'll just do it again here, like this. Oh no, whoops. That didn't work. Sorry. Could you, Belle, could you just post again? That would be great.
Maybe there are other questions from other students or participants.
Yeah, any questions for both me and WeTech, if you have any?
Hi, Susan. Hi, this is Anjana.
Hi, Anjana.
Really nice class and demonstration. Thanks. I've been doing watercolors a bit myself. I just want to ask about your personal opinion on how you deal with light, you know, just reflection and light.
Yes.
Do you tend to, what was the word you used? The bubbles, the blooms? Do you tend to do
Blooms.
those kind of things? Or do you tend to, because I know that some artists use gouache white to like put that.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, like I want to know what you like.
So I do use white. I use white pen and white paint sometimes, but in terms of creating that sort of like light coming from one side of the room, and then you have cast shadows on the other side, I don't use white for that. You know, so that's something where, yeah, I'm still learning that too. Basically, it's quite tricky because you need the perfect kind of reference, the perfect kind of day where things are shining at the right time. So I always learn also when I'm urban sketching is like when the sun's out and there's beautiful shadows, take a photo because it will go within 5 minutes, it's gone. And I never remember to do that either. So sometimes my painting is like, yeah, I can't even imagine where the light's coming from. So for that, I think, so I don't know if you like reading books, but my favorite so far in terms of looking at understanding light is this urban sketching book, Understanding Light. So I use white, I do, but it's only when I need a very thin white or a glint in somebody's eyes or, you know, like a shimmer or something, but I don't use it as a big block of color. Because you add white onto watercolor, it just looks like a block of paint. It doesn't have lightness to it, so I'd rather not do that. So that's what I recommend. This woman who wrote this book on Instagram, she's called The Rambling Sketcher. Have a look at her pieces because her pieces are, actually, what am I doing? I need to go do it like this, it makes it easier. So she does beautiful light, and her light is also just adding dark. Sometimes it's not even, it's just adding enough contrast so things really it pops out. So I'm also always learning how to do this. This is like an ongoing thing, you know. And sometimes when you look at a really light room and then you want to add some darkness in it, sometimes you have to overdo the dark, you know. So that's what I was taught as well. Quite a few of the teachers that I go to talk about that, how you sometimes have to exaggerate the dark. And sometimes you do that with, instead of using black, you add different tones of color in your black. So it creates a mood. Trying to find an example, but I don't think, I don't know.
Can I add to what you have just said, Susan?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so if you are a stickler for transparent watercolor, then gouache and titanium white is a no-go. In the US, there is a society called the transparent watercolor. So if you use opaque colors like titanium white or gouache, your painting will basically be kicked out and you cannot join their competition or, you know, exhibition. But most professional artists would shortcut the process by using gouache or titanium white. Because it is just an easier way of just getting the glint in the eye or the highlight in the metal and so on. Of course, the other way is to actually just leave white. So you can actually mess around with all your, you know, all those liquid where when it dry, you can paint away and then you can rub it off and then you leave paper white and all that stuff. I
Yep.
hate stuff, right? So I got a few bottles, I tried, I just throw it away after a while. I just don't use it. And I use a wash. So
Right.
every artist is his or her own, I think. So you just got to figure out what you want to do and practice and what's easy for you. If you like to mess around with those liquids, then by all means go ahead. But if you like me, want to use gouache, I think it's also perfectly fine. Just remember, paper white and gouache white are two different things and they look very, very different. So you just got to learn to deal with it. Yeah.
Yep, I agree with that totally. So here are some examples of my use of white. Whenever I, that's when I put white, when I need trickling water to go onto a fountain. How am I going to take it out, or I'm going to leave white out like that? I can't, right? So the easiest way is to add the white on top after. Yeah, this lady, she had gloves on. So I put the white on top and you can sort of see it there that it's kind of a bit chalky and kind of it blocks. It's blocky. It's not really transparent, like you say. But certain things like masks, it's pretty useful. When your person needs a mask, you just put it on with a pen. So this is the one I use, the pigment white by Uniball Signal. I think everyone uses this one. It's the best one. Don't use anything else. This is the brand you use. Yep. Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
There.
Thank you.
Thank you, Itek.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Good seeing everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you. Good
everyone.
night,
Thank you. Thank you,
Susan.
Remember-
Susan. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Susan and
Bye-bye.
Vijay. Yeah.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.